Okay, so there's been a lot of interest in this axe in particular because it's quite a unique design. This is a Berlin pattern, and it's kind of very similar to some other European patterns. What I think you tend to see is wider bitted axes, and then you get these specific felling axes with very, very small edge length and like long, narrow bits. I've determined that it really helps when cutting tough, knotty wood. The longer, narrow bit concentrates more force in a small area, and the axe does go in deeper. The long narrowness of it as well also means it's thinner for longer. You know, on an American axe, you're kind of getting to the eye here. So the longer bit just makes the whole geometry be able to be thinner. Still a wedge, but just a very thinly tapered wedge. Generally, I don't like small edge length. I prefer 4 to 5 inches. When you go about 6 inches, then the axe becomes awkward to use on smaller wood because, you know, you're overhanging the toe into the dirt, or if you're trying to not do that, then you end up chopping with the toe. So 4 to 5 inches is optimal. Smaller than that isn't very good for dealing with limbing and stuff. But these axes, I think, do have a place. I like this axe for felling, in particular softwoods with lots of knots. And it's quite good for bucking as well in tough woods with knots. I think because this bites deeper, it gets underneath the knot and tears it out much easier. You can see how the knot is like a piece of rebar running through. It's best to chop around knots, but there is some wood where you can't possibly do that. You just kind of have to bite the bullet. And I discovered with wide axes like the Tuatahi is it just does not go deep enough into the wood to really get underneath that knot and get into really the middle area where it's weaker. I think this axe is very reminiscent of the American Puget Sound patterns for felling giant softwoods on the west coast of America. I mean, obviously it's not a double bit, but you know, the same sort of thought process has gone into it, where longer, narrower bits. It really depends on the wood you're cutting. Some woods cut better with less depth and wider geometry, like particularly beech, I find can be very hard to chip, especially when you're dealing with larger stuff. So you need a shorter bitted axe that starts breaking that chip earlier. Okay, so here I've got a wider bitted axe. This is a Basque with a more wedged profile, and I know this, you know, there's clear wood here I'd chop through, but I'm deliberately chopping through the knotty bit just to demonstrate. Yeah. See, what's happening is I'm trying to chop both sides of the knot and get under it, but I just don't have the reach, and the cheeks are smashing into the side of the chip, slowing down the axe and stopping it cutting deeper. So in order to cut deeper, I have to get the knot, but I can't cut deeper because of the knot, if that makes sense. It just takes a lot more work. See, it's wobbling around, but I'm not ripping out the root. Finally. One thing though is these axes are much freer in the wood. I mean, you can see how much less this sticks. So it's a more efficient axe than the clear wood, but when you're dealing with knots, this really comes into its own. There's a moth. I mean, that really shows the difference in in length here. I mean, this axe is a bit lighter, but you know, it's where this one's starting to handle. This one has got another basically 50% more edge, so I put 50% longer. So horses for courses, and there's a reason behind these different patterns. It's not just some blacksmith going, I want to make something that looks cool. So it's quite a unique axe. Unfortunately, they don't make this axe anymore. This is probably from the 80s, from what I can gather. I managed to find it on German eBay. It's a new old head. Very lucky for 30 euros. So they do come up very occasionally. Other than that, you can still get some long narrow patterns from Mueller. They do a cockney pattern. It's like a French axe. They call it the Ardennes axe. So pretty unique, a cool axe. I enjoy using, although I do always take out another axe with me. If I'm using this axe, I like a secondary axe that's a bit lighter and wider for limbing. So that in combination works quite well, but it's not like a one axe option, I'd say.